Battle Through the Heavens. Chapter 230. The Agonizing Torment of the Green Lotus Core Flame. The heat trapped beneath his skin refuses to settle, vibrating with a jagged intensity that turns every shallow breath into a raw struggle for control. As this internal pressure peaks, the cooling weight of a mountain storm descends, drowning the forest in a chaotic silver blur. High above the whistling wind, an old man stands motionless on the jagged edge, staring into the electricity that tears through the dark.
A pitch-black rainy night. Silver rain attacked the mountains and forests. The fierce wind carried a whistling sound, and the forest echoed with a rustling noise. Occasionally, a bolt of lightning flashed in the sky, exploding with a loud boom that vibrated halfway up the mountain, its echoes lingering. In the dark sky, silver snakes flashed, and a crackling sound echoed continuously. The silver light was dazzling, and every so often it would illuminate the dark mountain forest as if it were day. Meanwhile, on a cliff with dangerous mountain terrain, an aged figure stood with his hands behind his back on a sharp mountain rock. His old face was expressionless as he stared at the lightning-filled sky. His body was slightly hunched, like an ancient pine tree, standing firmly on the cliff. Despite the violent lightning, he stood motionless with a calm aura. However, if one observed carefully, they would find that whenever the old man's eyes glanced toward the cave entrance blocked by rubble not far away, his hands, like eagle claws, would unconsciously tighten, before returning to normal after a moment. The old man stood firmly under the lightning, not saying a single word. He simply looked at the sky in silence, occasionally sweeping his gaze toward the cave, but only for a split second before quietly moving it away. His cautious manner made it seem as if he was afraid that looking too much would disturb the youth training inside. The dark night and the exploding lightning slowly passed, but the mountain forest had been trampled without mercy by the lightning for an entire night. As the darkness slowly dissipated, a ray of bright morning light slowly shot out from the eastern horizon. The sun slowly rose from the eastern horizon. Its warm light fell upon the earth, bringing a bit of vitality and spirit to the mountain forest that had been trampled by lightning for the entire night. Standing firmly on the mountain rock, Yao Lao turned his head slightly to look at the slowly rising sun, his eyes glancing back toward the cave that remained quiet without any reaction. Suddenly, under his sleeves, his hands clenched tightly. The corners of his eyes could not help but twitch a few times. Yao Lao took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, trying to calm himself down, but the anxiety in his heart lingered, making it difficult for him to regain his previous calm. 10 slender fingers lightly tapped on his arm, and as time passed and there was still no movement inside the cave, the rhythmic tapping gradually became as disorganized as Yao Lao's mood. The sun rose higher, slowly moving across nearly half the sky. The warm sunlight now became somewhat hot. Under these circumstances, the impatience in Yao Lao's heart secretly became more intense. After waiting for another moment, Yao Lao's 10 fingers tapping his arm suddenly stopped. His cloudy old eyes gradually emitted a sharp aura. Clearly, after a night of waiting, he did not intend to continue waiting aimlessly like this. As Yao Lao's fingers stopped, a powerful and majestic aura slowly rose from within his body. The pressure created by this majestic aura immediately caused several flying magical beasts circling in the sky to scream in terror and flee, as this place made them extremely frightened. Just as Yao Lao was preparing to forcefully enter to investigate, a disturbance finally appeared inside the quiet cave for the first time since last night. Boom! Inside the cave, a wave of energy suddenly and violently expanded. It was immediately blocked by the cliff, and instantly, massive cracks quickly spread across the cliffside. Standing on the mountain rock, Yao Lao looked at the cracks that suddenly spread. His tense face relaxed a bit. If there was movement, then the person inside was at least still safe. Not long after the first energy wave spread, several even more violent energy waves expanded. Under the impact of these energy waves, the hard cliff clearly became somewhat shaky and unstable.
What exactly is happening?
Looking at the collapsing cave, Yao Lao's brow furrowed once again as he whispered in confusion. Boom! Just as Yao Lao was bewildered, an explosion comparable to the thunder from last night rang out. It echoed powerfully from inside the cave, and with this energy wave attack, the cave that had already begun to collapse suddenly caved in toward the center with a series of loud rumbling noises. Piles of giant rocks fell heavily, and in a flash, the cave was turned into a pile of rubble. Seeing this sudden scene, Yao Lao's face changed slightly. His toes tapped lightly on the mountain rock, and his body quickly flew toward the collapsed cave. However, just as Yao Lao was about to land on the pile of rocks, green flames violently erupted from beneath the rubble. Instantly, the piles of huge rocks quickly turned into a pool of lava. His toes tapped the air, and Yao Lao's body landed forcefully, avoiding the green flames that were in a violent state. He then looked into the dark cave with a solemn and bewildered expression. Inside the cave, a miserable scream, tinged with hoarseness like a wounded wild wolf, roared out loudly. Following the scream, a green flame, even more terrifying than before, suddenly swept out. Anything blocking its path was burned into liquid by the domineering green flame.
Something has indeed happened.
Hearing this scream, filled with pain, Yao Lao's face instantly became extremely ugly. He cursed under his breath, and the bone-white, bone-chilling flame quickly covered his body. Then he forcefully passed through the green flames and rushed into the cave that had been destroyed into a mess. Landing, Yao Lao's eyes hurriedly swept across the inside of the cave. Finally, his pupils shrank slightly, stopping on the body of the youth not far away. The youth was kneeling on the ground with his head bowed, repeatedly and violently smashing his fists into the stone floor. At this time, Xiaoyan's clothes were nearly more than half burned away. Perhaps because his skin had been significantly strengthened previously, although he looked covered in blood, they were only minor injuries. As if sensing Yao Lao's entry, Xiaoyan struggled to raise his head. His face, which was originally full of spirit, was now almost completely pale. His distorted face looked somewhat terrifying, with dazzling blood appearing at the corners of his mouth. His teeth were clenched tight, and fresh blood slowly seeped through the gaps in his teeth. The hard rock beneath him had been smashed into spiderweb-like cracks by his fists. His gaze quickly swept across Xiaoyan's face, which was distorted in pain. Yao Lao's withered skin twitched slightly. To be able to force Xiaoyan, whose willpower and endurance were both outstanding, into this state, it was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying pain it was.
Give up on that damn thing!
Seeing Xiaoyan's face becoming increasingly pale, Yao Lao's heart turned cold, and he shouted. He had not expected the flame mantra to cause a person such maddening torment during the devouring of a heavenly flame.
No matter. I can still endure it.
Xiaoyan stared furiously, gritting his teeth hard. The muffled words came from between his clenched teeth. His fist once again slammed heavily onto the stone floor, and a large rock suddenly exploded. His trembling fist was covered in fresh blood. When Xiaoyan's hand propped itself against a rock, the sharp edge of the rock gouged a hole in his palm. Fresh blood flowed out, staining the rock a dazzling dark red.
I said that is enough!
Seeing Xiaoyan's hand dripping with blood, Yao Lao's face showed a hint of anger. With a roar, his foot stepped heavily on the ground, and his body shot toward Xiaoyan. Boom! Just as Yao Lao rushed toward Xiaoyan, Xiaoyan, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly trembled. Overwhelming green flames erupted from his body and swept toward Yao Lao, relying on their massive quantity to actually block Yao Lao.
Ah!
As the green flames erupted violently, the flames continued without end, seemingly charging out from Xiaoyan's pores. The pain from his body, bones, and cells being burned caused Xiaoyan to grab his head and slam it hard against the nearby rock. Fortunately, although the green flames caused Xiaoyan great pain, they also protected his body. Otherwise, that collision alone might have caused Xiaoyan to lose consciousness. More and more green flames spewed from Xiaoyan's body, until finally, Xiaoyan actually turned into something like a flamethrower. At a glance, it was truly terrifying.
The energy of the Green Lotus core flame is truly too powerful. With Xiaoyan's Dou-Shi strength, it is impossible for him to successfully devour it. It must be suppressed. Damn it. What I can use now is only a heavenly flame. Using it to help would be like adding fuel to the fire.
His experienced eyes swept over the situation, and Yao Lao immediately understood some of the problems within. However, even though he knew the problems, he still had no way to solve them, and he could only pace around in anxiety. However, just as Yao Lao was somewhat helpless, a low hiss suddenly echoed inside the cave. As the hiss ended, a 7-colored shadow suddenly shot out from Xiaoyan's sleeve. Its indifferent pupils looked at the green flames on Xiaoyan's body, and suddenly an unimaginable light flourished within its pupils. The 7-colored heaven-swallowing python quickly circled Xiaoyan once, then urgently opened its mouth, and a terrifying suction force erupted in an instant. Following this suction force, the green flames lingering on Xiaoyan's body were immediately pulled into the mouth of the 7-colored heaven-swallowing python.
More and more green flames were devoured by the 7-colored heaven-swallowing python, and the green flames on Xiaoyan's body slowly decreased. After another moment, the last trace of green flame finally left his body completely. When the last trace of green flame left his body, Xiaoyan's body suddenly trembled violently. His entire body went limp and he collapsed onto the cold stone floor.
Xiaoyan raised his head to look up at the small 7-colored snake that was circling around excitedly. A shallow smile slowly spread across the corners of his mouth. His eyes trembled slightly, and after a while, his vision finally went completely dark.